Shape. Well, Erika, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Yes, you too.
So let's begin our journey into your good work. I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago with this pandemic, so many things changed. How did you survive the pandemic of 2020, and how has it radiated and gone into your world in 2025?
Oh, I love that question. Okay, so March 2020. Everything changes.
Yeah,
So we spent the first, so my, at that time I was working full time in my business, Proteus International, which I started 35 years ago. And my partners and I spent the first 6 months when most of the big organizations that we worked with were kind of paralyzed trying to figure it out. And we focused on three things. We said, okay, we want our business to, survive. We want to help our clients' businesses survive through this. And we want to do the best we can for our people, our team. Those were our three goals. And we did all those things. We made it through. And what we did is Proteus does training, executive coaching, and facilitation of change. And we figured out we were already kind of on the road to do this, but it really accelerated. We figured out how to do everything we do virtually.
yeah.
So by June or July of that year, we could do everything we did virtually. And so that was a big shift. But the relevant to our current conversation, in 2020, when the pandemic started, I was in my late 60s and I realized that I hadn't really thought enough about my third act, about my next chapter. I knew I didn't want to work forever and ever, even though I love my work. And so we had a big house, which we subsequently sold, but we had a big house in the country. And fortunately, I was able to just walk. I walked for hours. And I really thought a lot about what turned into this new book, the new old book about my third act, what I wanted it to be, how I envisioned myself, who did I want to be as an older person, what kind of a life did I want to have? And so it was really the genesis of this book, this new book. And I was in the middle of writing another book, which came out in 2021, which was about change. So it all kind of worked together. And I feel like the Proteus business is stronger as a result of it. We have more options and we know how to help people in more ways. It made it clearer for me how I wanted to step back from the business. And it led to this new book in a lot of ways. So,
So let's get into your life as a coach and an author. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds as we talk about the third act here to get to the idea of what you do. So it's career day. The kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
my answer is I help people crack important codes.
Okay.
And that's
Which,
always been what I do. So this book is my sixth book. In every book, I got interested, curious about some important code that I want to help people crack, something that's ordinarily thought of as difficult or negative or challenging. How can I find the path through it, help people find the path through it so they can deal with these difficult things and make them simpler and more doable? For instance, the very first book I wrote almost 20 years ago was called Growing Great Employees. It's about how to be a good people manager, which I propose to you is one of the most difficult things in the world.
yeah.
And I feel like, I did a good job of kind of simplifying it and making it like, you can do this. Here are the key skills. Here's how you take somebody from all the way from finding them to hiring them to. So that's what I would tell kids. I help people crack important codes.
What did you want to be at 12 years old? What was your dream?
I wanted to be a ballet dancer, an artist, and an Indian princess. Those were my three things that I wanted to be
Wow.
when I.
So take me back to where you were born and raised. What were these foundational seeds that were planted to have you write, to help people crack codes, to be a coach, this career that you've had? Talk to me about it.
Man, I love these questions. Okay, so I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
Very interesting parents. My mom and dad were, I guess you would say that they were Republicans when that meant something very different, but they were very liberal socially, very much about civil rights, very much about women's rights. My mom had been, before they got married, a journalist, so she loved the language. She loved the English language and really encouraged all of us to read and to write. I'm one of four kids. Three of us are published authors,
Okay.
so that worked. Her job, she did her job. And my dad, who was an absolutely lovely human being, had wanted to be a lawyer, weirdly, since he was a little kid, was a labor negotiations counsel and was very successful at it because he was the most curious person I've ever known. He was endlessly curious. He was like a little kid. And I learned that from him. And I feel like my dad's curiosity and my mom's love of language and of excellence, she had very high standards, are probably the two frames that have been the most important for me.
So you've talked about the third act. Take me into the first two acts. What was kind of your career arc? How did you get not only the experience, but accumulate this insight into what you actually wanted to do with your life and to find the place where you belong?
Okay, so, grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, went to college. Halfway through college, I left college and I moved into a spiritual community, an ashram, and lived there for 10 years, just meditating, focusing on the internal. And then when I came out of the ashram in my early 30s, I had a wonderful opportunity. I went to work for this guy named Tim Galway, still around. He wrote The Inner Game of Tennis, which was a book. Tennis was the metaphor, but it was really a book about learning and about our interior monologue. And it became a kind of surprise bestseller at the end of the 70s. And so he turned it into a company in the early 80s called the Inner Game Company. And I went to work for him, learned a tremendous amount. It was kind of like, ooh, I like this. I'll keep going down this path. And then I got married and moved to the East Coast and kind of my used what I had learned with Tim and with corporate training, kind of turned that into I got a job as the head of instructional design for a small training company in upstate New York. I worked for them for a while. And then by that time, this was the late 80s, I felt like I really wanted to start my own company. And the reason was that in the 80s, training companies, executive coaching was just starting to be a thing, but it was very transactional. It's like, here, take this training, like an aspirin.
Yeah, sure.
And what I really wanted to do was to be what has come to be called 35 years later, a business partner. I wanted to partner with clients to help them get clear about the future they wanted to create for themselves, either individually or for their organization, and help them to achieve that future. And that became the mission of Proteus, which we founded in 1990, and it still is, helping people clarify and move toward their hope for a future. So then that's what I've been doing for the last 35 years. That's act one and act two.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, during the pandemic, I started to think about the third act. And still, though, helping, I mean, the new old is really about helping people in their third act get clear about the future they want to create for themselves and then offers skills and mindset to help them achieve that future.
What I love about what you're doing is that and it's not a standard. I'm not trying to be stereotypical here, but there's like a certain age where people just are like, all right, I'm done. I'm too old to learn, or I'm not going to do it. I'm not teachable. I can't do these skills. I'm winding down. My body's, it's like there's this
Yeah.
litany of things that go into that age. And I'm curious, how have you maintained this level of vitality, this agelessness to do things and to inspire people to be fearless and to capitalize? Because there's something about wisdom when you've been around long enough, it comes into your benefit. So
Yes,
how did you
absolutely.
acquire that?
Well, it's a wonderful setup to talk about the book because so as I was, especially during the pandemic, really starting to think about, okay, I'm going to be 70 in a couple of years. People think that's old. I don't feel old. I feel great.
Yeah.
How is this different? And the as I started to do the research for the book, one of the things I realized, and the reason I call it the new old, is because, and we don't ordinarily think about this, but this is the first time in history that most people get to be 65.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Wonderful piece of data. 100 years ago, 1 in 20 people was 65 or older. Now, 1 in 6 people worldwide are 65 or older. So being old is now common, A. And then another wonderful piece of data is that if you're a reasonably healthy, non-smoking 65-year-old in a Western country today, you have about even odds of living to be 90.
Wow.
And that's never been true.
Yeah.
Being 80 or 90, that has never been a common thing. So this thing that we've thought of, your first act is you grow up, your second act is you create a family and or a career and you're a grown up. And then we've thought that there was, and there has been until fairly recently, just like an epilogue. You live for a few years, you collect a little Social Security and you die, right? And now it's a full third chapter.
Yeah.
Most people live 10, 20, 30, 40 years after they turn 60. So I thought, okay, so then we can't just say exactly as you said before, well, you know, I guess I'm not working anymore. My kids are grown. I guess I'm just going to wind down. You
Yeah.
really want to do that for 30 years? I
Right.
don't think so.
Yeah.
So the first kind of principle, if you will, in the book is be the boss of your life. Continue as an older person to be the boss of your life because ageism is such that people will try and take that agency away from you, especially as you get older. Oh, don't worry your little old head. We'll take care of this for you. No, dude, my life, right?
Yeah.
So, a big part of that being the boss of your life is continuing to envision the future. Okay, maybe your future isn't 50 hours of work anymore, but what is it? Who do you want to be? What kind of a life do you want to have? So, that's that first principle, right? And then build a team around you to help you do that. The second principle, and you touched on this too, is manage your mindset. So it turns out, and I'm sure you already know this, we have huge control, much more control than we think we do over how we think.
Hmm.
And it turns out that that's especially important as you get old. There's this wonderful study that I just cite all the time. It was done starting about 25 years ago by the Yale School of Public Health. They got hundreds of people and they asked them a questionnaire to show what their attitude was about aging, right? Negative or positive. So they'd ask a question like, older people are less useful to society. True or false? All the true people went in one bucket and all the false people went in another bucket, right? So they just organized people according to their attitude. And then they followed them for 23 years. And the people, sorting for, they made it so there weren't too many variables in the experiment, but sorting just for that positive or negative attitude about aging, the people who had a more positive attitude about aging lived on average 7.6 years longer.
Sure.
7.6 years
Yeah.
longer. That's twice as much longer as they would have lived just by, lowering their cholesterol or
Hmm.
quitting smoking. Hugely impactful. So in that part of the book, I talk about how to manage your internal monologue, how to create a more hopeful, accurate mindset about aging. And then I also talk about how to be mindful, how to be grateful, all of these things that are linked to better quality and quantity of life. So that's the second principle.
Yeah.
And then the third principle is get good at change.
Yeah.
Because, younger people especially think that old people's lives are kind of stagnant and boring and never change. But actually, when you get old, there's a lot of change, and a lot of it is the more difficult kind of change. It's change that's imposed on you. You get sick, your partner dies, you move away from your children, all these big things happen and you don't really have control over it. So, how do you get good at change? How do you get fluent at changing? And even there's a chapter in there called Modify Gracefully. And the way I summarize that chapter is tennis becomes pickleball. How do you do things that work for your body, work for your stamina, work for your brain as you get older? And if you can do that without kicking and screaming, if you can do it gracefully, you can continue to have a lot of fun and stay, as you say, active and vital. And then there's the final chapter in there is about, again, to your point, about learning. Your brain is fine. And if you keep using it, it's going to stay fine. And when you get old and your kids are grown and hopefully you're not working 60 hours a week, you have a lot of time, more time than you've probably ever had to learn cool new stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? If you're not used to learning for fun, if all your life you've just learned because you had to for your job or whatever, how do you switch on that new thing of learning for fun? So we said this before we got started. I live in northern Spain most of the time. And starting when I was 65, I learned Spanish.
Yeah.
And now I'm pretty fluent. I
Yeah.
do my whole life in Spain. You can do that. You don't have to think that like, oh, now I'm
Uh-huh.
old. I can't learn anything. My brain, it's not true, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Wow. It's all about just reversing the myth, and the myth is
Yes,
the
exactly.
mentality, who's been the hero for you? Who's been the inspirational force that's allowed you to become who you are?
Oh my God, I have so many. I have so many mentors and heroes. My dad was certainly my first one, just a loving, honorable, curious human being who just, he's been gone for 35 years. I think about him all the time. And then as I've gotten older, especially in this last 3 or 4 years, I've realized, people talk about representation, how important it is, for instance, for little kids of color to see people of color achieving great things in their lives, doctors and teachers and lawyers and, statesmen. And I see that representation is equally important for old people because uh, images of vital, smart, cool old people are kind of thin on the ground, because of society's ageism. So, like, for instance, one of my new mentors is this woman who's a friend of mine now in Spain. Her name's Pilar. She's turning 90 in September.
Wow.
And she was a teacher of English here in Spain for her whole life. And then, when she retired in her late 60s, now she does a lot of volunteer work with young people and she lives in her own apartment. She's just a ball of light. She's one of a group of women we meet every Thursday just to talk and laugh and, eat pinchos. And she's amazing. I mean, yes, that's who I want to be in 16 years.
Yeah.
So I think heroes and models are daily. I
Yeah.
think you can find people all the time that you look to and say, "Wow, great. I love that. I'm taking that."
Yeah. If you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find inspirational, that you absolutely admire, who would that be?
Nelson Mandela,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
That'd be a good one.
So I've done yoga for more than 50 years. I have a wonderful yoga teacher here in class. I take yoga classes here in Spain, and he was talking the other day about the yogic principle of ahimsa, which in Hindi means non-violence. And it's not just not hitting people,
Yeah.
you know. It's having a nonviolent mentality toward the world and figuring out insofar as possible how to respond not through violence, but through love, through clarity, through logic. And Mandela is such an incredible example of that.
Absolutely. So, what gets you up every day? What has consistently gotten you up and motivated you to do work, to help people, to crack the code, to write? What is that for you every day?
It's a couple of things. I think the main thing is my personal mission is very similar to the Proteus mission. My personal mission is to help people, the people in my life, individually and writ larger, become who they want to become. Not who I want them to become or who society thinks they should become, who they want to become. And that's very exciting to me, whether it's my friends, myself, my husband, my kids, my grandkids. I love that. I love to feel as though I'm helping people achieve their own dreams and vision. That really does get me up in the morning. And then the other thing, back to curiosity, every day I wake up and I just feel like, damn, there's cool stuff,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you, ready to go out into the world and do it up. And you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've accumulated. What advice would you give that young version of you?
Oh, I love that question. I either wouldn't give her any advice because she wouldn't listen to me anyway, and
Right?
18-year-olds
That's the other
figure
part.
out everything by themselves. But if I could give her some advice that she would take, it would be um, balance your forward momentum with depth. I was so fast when I was young, and I just wanted to do everything and do it right now, and I was very impatient. And I've had to learn patience over this last, 60 years since I was a young teenager. And having kids helped, being 73 helps, but just that to balance forward with depth. I think that's the advice I'd give. I don't think she I don't think she'd hear me, but
Yeah, that's the other part of the question too. Yeah, will they listen? So let me ask you this. If you were to go into a room of everybody you've worked with throughout the years that have known you in a professional sense, and you swim through that sea of people and go to a podium and you can tell them one fun story, an adventure, a wonderful place, the first concert, jumping out of an airplane, some great fun story, what would you tell that room of people?
oh my gosh. This is going to sound like a cop out,
Yeah,
but it's how I operate.
sure.
It would be situationally dependent.
Yeah,
It would depend on where they were at and what they needed and what I got from them. And this is how I've always run my business and operated my life is I would want to start by asking them some questions. So what's up for you guys? How are you doing? What would you like to talk about? What can I tell you that would be helpful? Because I never like to assume that I know what people need.
yeah.
I like to start by asking.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. So let me ask you this. Of everything that you've done, evolved to, experience in your life, achieved, what are you the proudest of?
That my children, both my biological children and I call her my acquired daughter, my stepdaughter, although that's such a weird word, are just such good human beings. Not perfect, but just good human beings and such good, authentic, caring, deep parents. It's amazing watching my kids be parents. They're all very different. All of them and all of their mates are very different, but they're wonderful. They're wonderful people and they're wonderful parents. And I'll take a little credit for that.
Absolutely, you should. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
What I'll tell you is so I always try and practice what I preach. So I've done all the things that I encourage people to do in this new book, in the new old book. And so I'll tell you my vision of myself, which I think I'm doing a pretty good job of fulfilling. So it has two parts, and this is what I encourage in the book. Have a vision for yourself, you as a person, who you want to be as an older person, and a vision for your life. So this is my vision for me and my life in my 70s. So in my 70s, I am elven, like an elf,
Yeah,
full of light, strong, deep, and magical.
right on.
That's my vision, right?
Yeah,
And my vision for my life is that my 70s are about exploration, time to discover and support and enjoy myself, the world, and those I love.
yeah. That's great. So I got to know what's the best thing about living in Spain and what do you miss about America?
Um, the best thing about living in Spain is everything. I mean, the people, the culture, the nature, the gastronomy, the vibe, just the vibe, how it is, I love living in Spain. And the only thing really I miss about America is my kids and grandkids who all
Yeah,
live there. So
yeah,
we go back and visit pretty regularly.
yeah. It's a strange time here. So, so let me ask you this. If anyone wants to pick up a copy of the New Old, they want to reach out, they want to learn more, any of the good business, where do they go?
New Old is on Amazon, Amazon worldwide. So Amazon.com, Amazon ESDE, wherever you are, you can find it in all its forms, paperback, hardback, audiobook, ebook. And if you want to find out more about me and connect with me, you can go to my website, which is erikaandersen.com. My both names are spelled a little oddly, so it's easy. It's exactly it is there on the screen. And if you want to find out more about Proteus, you can go to proteus-international.com.
Okay. This has been great, Erika. Thank you so much. Thank you for your story. Very refreshing, inspirational. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're out. So yeah, I grew up in a family where it was always like, I don't feel good. I don't, I, blah, blah. It just, you just get inundated that with that. And I think part of it is an American mindset because I see the European, like even the Spanish population, even though I haven't been there, is just really just like, you just go. I mean, you have a number attached to your existence, but you just got to keep going.
Precisely. And the average life expectancy in Spain is 5.5 years longer than the average life expectancy in the US. So they're doing something
Christ.
right.
Uh-huh.
And, having healthcare, universal healthcare certainly
Uh-huh.
helps.
Yes.
But people are just, they know how to balance work and family
Yep.
and play and there's so much connection. That's the last chapter in the book is about connection. And I see it every day. Like it's very common. You see it many times a day. A middle-aged person walking down the street with an older person on their arm. They're just walking along talking.
Yep.
And it's just somebody and their mom or dad or aunt or uncle. And that's just, and you often see three generations wandering around together. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Well, this has been wonderful. Best of luck with everything. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You ask wonderful questions, which is great and really fun. And you seem to really care about the answers. So
Yeah,
both of those
I
things are
do.
good.
I do. It's fascinating. I
Looking
think
to get new clients to your business through cold calling or email marketing? At Agency Y, they envision a world in which small and big companies have equal chances to win new customers in the market. Their purpose is to bring parity and reduce the gap between large and small firms with the help of their cold calling and cold email marketing services. Use the code Joe Dimino 10 at www.agencyyyy.org/coldcallingjoe.php or www.agencyyyy.org/emailmarketingjoe.php to get 10% off your first order. This is Joe Dimino of Neon Jazz and Famous Interviews, and I stand behind Agency Y to meet your business dreams.